Welcome to Politics and Psychology. Today we are discussing, Bro, Stop Blaming Trump. And I'm excited that you are joining me today, and I apologize for being absent for the last 2 weeks. But if you don't hear from me or don't see an episode pop up, then please remember it's not that I am ignoring you or not committed to our podcast, but that it's election and I may have other crises that I might be trying to help resolve to help improve our country. So I thank you for your patience and understanding, and I appreciate you for joining today and listening. In July 2024, Vice President Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee for the 2024 presidential election, and Donald Trump formally became the Republican nominee, although he was the informal nominee beginning March 2024. And Harris only became the nominee after President Biden, Democrat, declined to continue his presidential re-election. And prior to this, both Biden and Trump were the presumptive nominees. They were also both male. And with this sameness, there was no significant gender difference in male and female voters for either candidate. But this all changed when Harris entered the race. Now we see a political gender divide, with more females voicing their support and dollars for Harris, and more than that, we see that Harris immediately began to significantly increase in popularity and support among young women. However, her support among young men has been significantly lower and also a lot slower. So for Trump, his voter support numbers have pretty much remained the same among both males and females, but with Harris entering the race, this was an opportunity for him to attract the young men that she has not been able to persuade. Based off of this, Trump has been going on non-traditional media outlets and shows hosted by social media influencers, comedians, gamer YouTubers, and podcasters that have huge audiences of young men. And these audiences are not only male-dominated, but they pretty much have content that mostly engages or heavily focuses on masculinity, alpha male behaviors, male dominance and aggression, and of course doing silly stuff such as pranks on each other, chicken wing eating contests, things like that. But these shows also focus on guys playing rough with each other, never backing down, and also not letting a female control you. And it's because of this type of content that Trump's narcissistic traits are attractive to these male audiences. As a politician and a salesperson, Trump is excellent in recognizing and creating opportunities that will benefit himself. That's why he has been giving these type of shows more interview time than the traditional news outlets or the campaign stops. And because Trump is making some progress, at least as far as getting support from these young audiences on social media, having at 1.14 million views on just one of his appearances, because of this, Trump is being blamed for using these young male audiences to boost his ego rather than meeting with journalists. Now, in general, young men ages 18 to 24 are not as likely to vote as young women 18 to 24. And these young male viewers who are also watching these male-dominated interviews are less interested in politics and will therefore not ask Trump the hard policy questions or go against Trump giving misinformation. And so for this, Trump is being blamed for catering to a group of potential voters who could care less about politics and more about his personality and being entertained by him. And also because of this, Trump is being blamed for taking the easy way out to get male supporters. And where some are accusing female voters only voting for Harris because she's a female, but if you look at why these young males are connecting with Trump's personality, we will see that Trump is not to blame. Trump is also not to blame for other groups of males, such as Black men and Hispanic men, for being more supportive of Trump than Harris. In fact, it's actually the Democratic Party that is to blame. It's the Democrats who have been working consistently to emasculate men and manhood and to suppress natural boy behavior. So let's look at how this has been done. Democrats have made historical progress in fighting against the inequalities and injustices against women. And right now, the current Democratic Party platform is, quote, "We are committed to ensuring full equality for women. Democrats will fight to end gender discrimination in the areas of education, employment, healthcare, or any other sphere. We will combat biases across economic, political, and social life that hold women back and limit their opportunities," end quote. The Republican Party has also made significant contributions to women's rights. In fact, if it were not for the Republican Party, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 would not have passed. During the vote, 69% of Democrat senators voted for the act, compared with 82% of Republican senators. And in the House of Representatives, 61% of Democrat representatives voted for, compared with 80% of Republican representatives. So without the GOP of the past, I emphasize of the past, the 1964 Civil Rights Act could not have passed. However, since then, the Democrats have gone into overdrive for civil rights and equality, and they expanded their platform to not only expand the rights of women, but also for sexuality. And in doing this, they have been able to capture and maintain the votes of both women and non-heterosexuals. This is why more Democratic leaders support and attend events celebrating homosexuality and gender dysphoria than Republican counterparts. And remember, gender dysphoria is the actual name for transgender. It's also why more non-heterosexual voters register as Democrat versus Republican. Most recently, in the last presidential election, a 2020 Williams Institute of UCLA report showed that during the 2020 election, among non-heterosexual voters, 50% were Democrats and only 15% were Republicans. And this has been the trend, with Democrats embracing non-heterosexual voters significantly more than Republicans and bringing forth legislation that supports the concerns of non-heterosexuals significantly more than Republicans do. And by the Democrats expanding their fight for equality for women to then include sexuality and to then rename their focus from women's equality to gender equality, they then had to change their definition of woman. Matt Walsh, if you haven't already heard of him, is a right-wing political commentator who made a documentary entitled "What is a Woman?" I definitely encourage you to watch it, regardless of your political stance. It's very informative about the whole understanding of gender dysphoria and how that impacts legislation and just social views of who we are as male or female. But I definitely encourage you to watch it. So in this documentary, you will see many politicians and judges, including a Supreme Court judge nominee who, under oath, is refusing to answer the question of what is a woman and refusing to define the difference between a man and a woman. There are also other people in the film who are marching as Democrats for gender equality who are also unable to answer this question. So in essence, to justify no longer focusing on women's rights for equality and to expand or to justify expanding their focus to include homosexual men, Democrats renamed their focus to now be called, quote, gender discrimination, and to then address the needs of lesbian women and other non-heterosexual groups, they then removed the definition of woman. So much so that, like with the Supreme Court justice nominee, many Democratic leaders have refused to publicly define the word woman, but at the same time have aggressively tried to redefine what is a man. And to do this, they began labeling all traditional male behavior as toxic, abusive, and narcissistic. And before we continue, we do have to acknowledge that it is true that the majority of men in leadership throughout history, throughout all races, and in all countries have abused their strength and power to oppress women and girls. And even in our own country, male-dominated power has led to women not being able to go to school, to work, to vote or qualify for a home or business loan. So there's no denying that many powerful men in our own country have abused their power and used it to control women and limit their freedoms. And because of this and the global perspective, it has led to the need to fight for gender equality and gender equity. But unfortunately, the strategy of the Democrats has been to overcorrect for the past abuses of powerful men. And by overcorrect, I mean that Democrats have tried to correct a wrong in such an extreme way that they ended up causing more harm and creating another wrong, well, actually several wrongs. So instead of fixing the systems that prevent the empowerment of women, Democrats have instead worked to weaken men. Their strategy should have been to empower women while at the same time empowering men, and also removing strategically only the direct oppressive behaviors and policies enacted against women, rather than having a global slate of empowering women regardless of how it may negatively impact men. You see this even in commercials, with a woman being off at work, of course showing that she can be a significant income producer for the family, as the old commercial used to sing, I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan. I can sing much better than that, by the way. But, that commercial. And then you would also have where she's at work and then the male is home taking care of the children or trying to wash clothes. But even though there's something wrong with the male being home and helping to take care of the domestic parts of the house, you see a lot of individuals who are Democrat voters who are also very powerful in the entertainment and many other industries, using their perceptions or using their power to redefine the perception of men and manhood through their mediums. So like you'll see in this commercial that not only is the man home and taking care of the children and washing dishes, but he's been made to look like he's clueless of how to help out around the house and may not even know how to turn the washer or the dryer on. Or when it comes to driving commercials, yes, women can be seen driving a car to symbolically represent that they can take the lead and drive the family in a positive direction. But what these commercials are doing are not just showing the female in the driver's seat with her family, but showing the man in a subservient passenger seat and often refusing to ask for help, which is, of course, a stereotype, or just being lost and not knowing how to order anything from the drive-thru or do anything to calm the kids down in the background. So by fighting against women's inequalities, Democrats in politics and Democrat leaders in other industries that have influence on our perception and buying behaviors and beliefs in society about male and female behavior, then together they have heavily promoted the message that men and women are equal and that girls and women can do anything that boys and men can do. But that is simply not true. Just like men cannot do everything that a woman can do. But to justify this, they have to ignore biology and science so that they can have support for their laws favoring non-heterosexual groups and to normalize behaviors that are, from an evolutionary and psychological sense, abnormal. Democrats are also trying to redefine a, quote, healthy man, end quote, as a man who embraces feminine traits and behaviors, and they have relabeled, along with, again, politics and other industry leaders, have relabeled natural male behaviors as toxic and abusive, while at the same time trying to eliminate the definition of woman. And to justify their new definitions, this is what led to the phrase that, quote, gender is a social construct, and therefore imply that you can create your own gender identity, which is, by the way, what led to the unnecessary use of pronouns. But by saying that gender is a social construct, we do have to understand that it is partly true. It is a social construct. Sociologically, defining what is a man will depend upon your culture and your society. The same is true for saying what a woman is. By saying gender is a social construct, meaning that society is constructing or building an idea and definition of something, that by having a social construct of gender, then you don't necessarily have to be a hyper masculine man. You can be a man who wears dresses, and that will be okay, and it won't impact negatively on you being a man. Or we don't have to say what a female is, or that a female has a uterus and of the two genders is able to bear children, because then that would offend individuals with gender dysphoria, and we don't want to lose their vote. So then to make it all justified, we'll just get rid of the definition of woman and just saying, well, you just pick what you want to be called and then use your pronouns to help us know what to call you. But looking back at the cultural part of social construction for gender, in one culture, being a man would be defined as a male who drinks beer, shoots guns, makes all the money in the family while the woman stays home. Or a man could be defined as someone who is able to play football in the backyard with his son and barbecue and fix things around the house. In another culture, being a man might be that you have killed another man or killed a large animal. Or a man might be defined as someone who does not show emotions. Likewise, a woman could be defined based on a social or cultural definition. So, for example, a woman could be seen as becoming a woman or entering womanhood when she experiences her first menstrual cycle. Or a woman could be defined as someone who cooks and keeps the house clean. Or you're a woman if you make your own money and have sexual freedom without being in a committed relationship. So defining what a woman is and what a man is, or what is manhood and womanhood, will change based on cultural, social, and family traditions. But what will not change is male and female. These are biological determinants that do not change with time, culture, social beliefs, or even legislation. But what the Democrats have done is to overlap male with man and manhood, therefore saying, okay, well then we can then change our social definition of what man is. Likewise, they have overlapped female with woman and womanhood for the same reasons. And when they make these overlapping of terms when fighting for gender equality, it leads to them disregarding the basic fact that the two genders are not equal. Males and females are distinctively different from each other in their biological and psychological functioning. For example, men are more likely to see the bigger picture and have a greater or more global solution to a problem, whereas women are more detail-oriented and will seek a solution that has more details and more fine-tuned details than a global solution that men are more likely to identify. It's also scientifically true that males, in general, have a higher muscle mass than females, and therefore are generally physically stronger than females. Females have higher rates of hormonal fluctuations, and this is associated with natural emotional fluctuations. At the same time, women have higher white blood cell counts, and this makes their bodies more easily able to fight off colds and sickness compared with men. From an evolutionary science perspective, this makes perfect sense because it's the females who are the ones who carry the child, and being able to have the woman fight off infections at an easier rate or a higher rate of fighting off illnesses will not only help keep the woman who is pregnant alive and safe, but it will also help ensure the fetus or the unborn child remains alive and viable and healthy throughout the gestation period as well as through the end of labor. There are also differences in how males versus females process information and learn. Men generally outperform women on visual spatial tasks, and women generally outperform men on verbal fluency and perceptual speed tasks. This is one reason why males usually find math easier to learn and why women usually find English and writing easier to do and are usually better verbal communicators. And there are numerous other examples just based on behavior and psychological processes. And these natural differences do not change with evolution and again with legislation. We mentioned females having higher hormonal fluctuations, and there are hormonal fluctuations for both male and female as we age. For example, as females age, they have an increase in testosterone, and this leads them to have hair loss on their head, but increased body hair. In contrast, when males lose testosterone, they still have hair loss on their head, but it leads to them having more rounded stomachs. But when we do not consider aging, males being the gender that has significantly higher testosterone levels, is the testosterone that is responsible for much of the male behavior that we can see starting in childhood. It's testosterone that plays a key role in dominance behaviors such as aggressive and competitive behavior, and also, again, competition and being very rough and very physical. So how does this relate, all of this talk about history and evolution, how does this relate to Trump and the Democrats? Well, while the Democrats are aggressively seeking to create gender equality, they not only overlapped male with man and manhood, but they also began supporting messaging that being masculine is toxic and that healthy manhood and healthy boyhood is suppressing natural testosterone-driven male behavior and assuming more feminine traits and more submissive behaviors toward women. Males are being told to be the opposite of who they are, told to be less physical and more emotional. Males are being shown images of famous athletes, even Olympians, wearing nail polish and pearl necklaces. Boys are being told in school and at home that being physical is a sign of aggression and is therefore bad. Young boys are also being taught that their naturally higher levels of testosterone and energy is bad, and that being more feminine makes you a better boy, and being less energetic also makes you more calm and understanding, but showing strength means you are being too aggressive. And it's because these young boys cannot release their energy and are having to suppress testosterone-boosted related behaviors that more boys in our country are experiencing anger and depression at higher rates than ever before. So let's do an imagery exercise to see how this could work. Think about if you have to sneeze, and maybe you're in a place where you having sneezing would be uncomfortable or not appropriate if you're really, really loud. So sneezing is a natural reaction to something in your nasal passages, but when you're trying to hold a sneeze in, you can cause a whole lot more internal damage just by holding it in than releasing it. Similarly, when a male is being told that he must hold in or suppress his masculinity and become more feminine, then this causes more damage internally. You are trying to force him to hold in what is naturally supposed to be released, and therefore causing more damage not only to his ego or his psychological view of himself, but also to his biological functioning. Suppressing testosterone-driven instincts and adrenaline is going to make him, through the suppression, more angry, more frustrated, and more depressed. So it is correct to teach boys and young men to be more kind to women and to use their strength and power for good and for protection rather than abuse. But it's overcorrecting by encouraging boys to become like women. And it's also overcorrecting to emphasize female empowerment while simultaneously trying to weaken the male role in our families, in television, schools, and society. And this is what makes it for Trump to be very attractive to many males. As a clinical narcissist, meaning that he definitely meets the full criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, Trump conveys extremely high levels of confidence. He never admits defeat or wrongdoing. He is politically powerful and financially successful. For voters who are alpha males, they admire or want to be alpha males. For those who value the strength of men or who were raised with cultural beliefs or traditional male leadership, then for these voters, Trump is a symbol of fighting back against the efforts to weaken men in our country. On the other hand, with Vice President Harris, who is a female, you can see heterosexual men being triggered to think that, well, if a female is going to lead our country, and it's also a Democrat who would be a Democrat female president, then she is more likely to take away even more rights of men and is more likely to support policies and laws and agendas to further disempower or dismiss men just for the simple sake of trying to uplift women. When these men see former President Trump, however, and he's on these male-dominated podcasts, he's on these testosterone-driven YouTube channels, then of course Trump is going to appear as the more viable option. It's because Trump, who is notorious for standing his ground, being steadfast, and going after what he wants, that to some men, that is a symbol of strength and manhood. And it's not Trump's fault that Democrats have aligned themselves with policies, entertainment, fashion, and other industries that sacrifice science and disregard accurate definitions of healthy manhood. It's not Trump's fault that his own narcissism has now become seen as the only way for men to salvage themselves. So when we have Trump, who is a man's man, who does not apologize for his strength and will maintain his strength or promote his superiority, even when it's hurtful or abusive to others, although he's not a healthy example of what a man is, it's easy to see how men who want to resist the feminized ideology, messaging, and images that powerful Democrat voters and leaders consistently promote, then it's very easy to see that Trump would be the savior or seen as a savior of men who do embrace traditional values of a man being a man and a man not adapting feminine attributes in clothing or behaviors and not giving in to pressures to suppress their natural strength or natural protective instincts to avoid offending women or to avoid being seen as a toxic threat. This is not to say that men who are oppressive or abusive should be promoted or celebrated or encouraged, but only that the strength of Trump is a signal to men, whether they are healthy or unhealthy, narcissistic or not. It's a signal to men who embrace their natural maleness and however they view men and manhood should be. It's a signal to them that with Trump, that you have an option to not be made to feel ashamed for being a man or not being made to feel afraid to express your natural abilities that come along with being a male. It is the fact that Harris is not attracting as many male voters as Trump. Some are blaming this on gender bias, saying that men are intimidated by a woman in power or that they could not accept a woman as being capable of leading our country. Some are blaming former President Trump for catering to the young white male hypermasculine population and that he, compared with Vice President Harris, has been more successful in attracting alpha males and minority males, not because he's actually being a good candidate, but just based off of his personality, his entertainment value alone. Trump is being criticized for ignoring news interviews to be on shows hosted by social media influencers like Vaughn or pranksters like the Nelk Boys, YouTuber Logan Paul, and live streaming gamers such as Aiden Ross. But because Trump is going on these shows rather than traditional news interviews, then Trump is being blamed for playing the, quote, male card or the young male bro card and not really doing the hard interviews where he would be confronted or questioned for some of his statements. But again, as a salesperson and politician, Trump is just making the most of seeing an opportunity and taking it. And this opportunity was created by the Democrats. By overcorrecting in their efforts to gain equality for women, Democrats have, in essence, implemented policies and practices where men are being ignored and their natural behaviors being suppressed. When you add in cultural factors, it's not a surprise also that many Hispanic men and Black men are also favoring Trump as the more viable candidate. Hispanic men and Black men, they often have social views and cultural histories where the man is the leader in the home and a community, and that even if he is 14, but he's the only male in that house, he is assumed to be the man in that house and given respect as far as his decision making and the expectations of the other females, their expectations of him by putting him in that man role. In the Hispanic and Black male communities, they're often given respect for being more of a masculine man than a feminine man, and they're also more respected by being just the caretaker. The man that they have in their homes is the one who gets the seat at the head of the table and the bigger portion of chicken for dinner. He has authority that's respected in the home and in the community, and he's the one that provides order in the home. And he's usually the one where if the mom says, when you get home from school, if you were acting bad that day, just wait until your father gets home. So he's seen as a man, it means to be the leader who also has authority for discipline and order, but it's also with protection and provision for our family. The same is true for males who are religious or practice faith, especially if you believe in God as a father rather than God as a mother. So for men who see God as a father, even if they don't even believe in God or believe in or practice a religion, if they still have some concept of God and this God is seen as a father, then they therefore see God as a male rather than a female. And with their unconscious or even conscious beliefs of what a father who is a God does, that will influence who they believe or how they believe men should be and what would define a male character. They're more likely to, if they view God as a male, to then see men or manhood to be associated with God as a fatherhood, someone who provides for you, protects you, guides you, gives you instruction, and helps you when you're in need. So when you combine these, for Black men and Hispanic men, they often view manhood as an attachment to their core cultural and core religious beliefs that they then use to evaluate themselves on how good or not so good they are being as man or a good man or an upstanding man or a not so good father or husband. But it's the recent history of the Democrats trying to erase these traditions and these definitions of what many Black and Hispanic men have attached to for what a man is, by the Democrats trying to erase these traditions and redefining a male's role in society. This attempt of theirs is causing men, such as Black and Hispanic men, to feel a conviction in their morals and their values. And they may not even agree with everything that Trump has said or is saying or has done, but they see Trump as the only candidate now who can stop the Democrats from assaulting not only their own view culturally and religiously of manhood, but also the view of manhood for their sons and their grandsons. So while many are blaming Trump for creating a gender divide in the 2024 presidential election, claiming that he is exploiting the votes of young male voters, when you review how the Democratic Party has moved from helping women achieve equal rights to later aligning with messages that being a, quote, real man is being comfortable with being feminine and that strong men are toxic, then it's not Trump, but the Democrats who have created a large segment of male voters who feel devalued and voiceless in our country, and who fear that a female president, a female Democrat president, will further erase their strength and masculinity, as well as their cultural and religious beliefs about manhood. It's the Democrats who have presented Trump as the opposite of Democrat ideals, and therefore making him the ideal president for them. Well, that ends our time for today. I do look forward to speaking with you next week, but until then, please continue this conversation using science and love.
Walk the path of light. And if you run too fast,